I
really
didn't
going
plan
through with
on
this,
being the one
opening a
her husband
bookstore.
trusted.
So you have,
It
it's got
started with a
Legs
favor.
ago.
A friend of a friend, someone
well,
from the
it's always
neighborhood,
been a dream of
needed help
mine.
getting an old bookstore ready to reopen after a minor flood. I did some contracting work between college classes and money was tight, so when her husband called, I said yes without thinking twice. I met her on a Wednesday. Gray light poured in through the front windows, shelves half empty, cardboard boxes stacked like crooked towers. She was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, a scarf loose around her neck like she'd forgotten to tighten it. Not beautiful in the way people write songs about, more like the kind you can't quite look away from once you've noticed. "Thanks for coming," she said, voice steady, warm. "He said you'd know what you're doing." I wiped my palms on my jeans before shaking her hand. She noticed. I could tell by the way one eyebrow lifted, just barely. The job was simple: replace some baseboards, patch drywall, repaint. But the place was quiet, too quiet, and when you're in a quiet space with someone you don't know, you start to fill it with small things. Asking where the ladder is, pointing out the smell of wet paper still clinging to the air. She had a way of answering like she'd already thought of something funnier than what you said. "You're younger than I expected," she said at one point, watching me wrestle a warped shelf away from the wall. I tried to sound casual. "That a problem?" She smirked. "Only if you expect me to lift anything heavier than a coffee cup." We didn't talk much after that, not in any meaningful way. But I noticed how she moved, deliberate, efficient, like she'd been carrying responsibility longer than I'd been alive. Sometimes she'd hover near the window, scrolling on her phone, only half in the room. Other times, she'd stand beside me without speaking, watching the paint roll out smooth and white, the sound of it like soft rain against plaster. There was one moment, stupid, tiny, nothing, that still got under my skin. I was crouched by the front display case, trying to loosen a rusted hinge, and the screwdriver slipped. A sharp click against glass. She was beside me instantly. "You okay?" "Fine," I said, gripping the tool tighter than I needed to. But she stayed there, crouched too, knees cracking, close enough that I caught a faint trace of citrus from whatever lotion she used. She reached out, not to help, not really, just rested her hand briefly on the edge of the case, fingers brushing mine by accident. Neither of us moved for a beat too long. Then she stood, dusted off her jeans like nothing happened, and asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes, maybe too quickly. When she came back with 2 paper cups, she set mine on the counter without looking at me, her attention already somewhere else. I kept glancing at that cup like it held more than caffeine. We didn't speak about it. The touch, the pause, the way the air seemed to shift around us like the room was holding its breath. But it stayed with me, humming quietly beneath every word after. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. The next time I saw her, the bookstore smelled less like floodwater and more like old paper waking up. We were down to painting trim, moving shelves, the kind of quiet work that leaves too much room for thinking. She was already there when I walked in, hair pulled back, sweater sleeves pushed up, a pencil tucked behind one ear like she'd been writing something down but didn't want to forget where she left off. "Morning," I said. She nodded without looking up from the box she was unpacking. "You're early." "I had the time," I said, setting down my tools. She hummed a sound that could have meant anything. Approval, amusement, or maybe just that she was too tired to form words. Her movements were efficient but distracted. She'd pause mid-task, glance at her phone, then shake her head like she'd remembered something she didn't want to think about. I noticed her hands first. Not soft, not rough, but steady, capable. Rings that didn't match, a faint ink stain near her thumb. I don't know why that stood out, but it did. Like her life wasn't just one thing. Like she belonged to more than this quiet shop, more than whatever version of her I'd been allowed to see. We worked mostly in silence. Every now and then I'd make a joke about how the shelves leaned like drunks in a rainstorm, about how many books someone could own and still need more. She'd smile sometimes, faint, quick, like she was embarrassed to be caught enjoying it. At one point, I asked, "You okay?" She froze with a paperback half out of its box, eyes still on the pages but not really reading. "Why? You just seem somewhere else," I said. She gave a small laugh, not quite bitter but close. "I guess I am. Happens a lot lately." I wanted to ask where else was. Instead, I just kept painting. She sat on the floor after a while, cross-legged, leaning against a shelf like gravity had one. She rubbed her temple with one hand, eyes shut for just a second longer than a blink. "You need a break?" I asked. "Maybe," she said, then sighed. "Or maybe I need to learn how to stop running on fumes." It was the first time she sounded like the mask had slipped, even just an inch. No polite tone, no effortless control, just tired. Human. I sat across from her, the smell of dust and paint between us. I didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound stupid, so I said nothing. We just sat there for a minute. The sounds of traffic outside, a faint drip somewhere in the plumbing, the kind of stillness that makes you notice every inhale. When she opened her eyes, they landed on me. Not quick, not casual. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't, and that silence felt louder than words. By the fourth week, the bookstore didn't need us anymore. The shelves stood straight. The windows gleamed. The place looked like it had been waiting for its second life. We were supposed to be done. I came back anyway, on a day when her husband was supposed to meet with suppliers. He wasn't there. The lights were half off. She was sitting behind the counter, not working, not reading, just sitting, staring at nothing like it had a story only she could hear. "You okay?" I asked from the doorway. She blinked like I'd startled her. "I should have locked the door," she said. "You want me to go?" She shook her head, slow. "No, just, I don't know what I want right now." I walked in quiet, sat on a stool near the register. Neither of us spoke. The air was heavy with the smell of rain. It had just started outside, soft but steady, like the world was trying not to interrupt us. I picked at a splinter in the wood. She leaned her chin into her hand, elbow on the counter. A long minute passed. Then I heard myself say it, low, not even sure if I meant to speak. "What are we doing?" She closed her eyes for a beat. When she opened them, they were wet but not crying. "I don't know," she whispered. "This doesn't feel like just..." I stopped. I didn't know what word to use. Work? Friendship? Madness? She gave the smallest shake of her head. "It's not supposed to feel like anything. You're kind. You show up. That's all. Doesn't feel like that," I said. She pressed her lips together, thumb rubbing the edge of her palm like she was trying to erase a thought. Finally she said, almost to herself, "I keep thinking about how wrong this is, even when nothing's actually happened." I laughed, quiet and bitter. "Feels like something happened anyway." We sat there, two people with nothing in common except this ache neither of us had invited. Both of us pretending it could still be undone if we just stayed very still. "I should go home," she murmured, but didn't move. "Yeah," I said, though I didn't move either. Rain tapped the windows like a clock we couldn't stop. I could feel my heart in my throat, loud in a room where nothing else dared to speak. She didn't say anything, just looked at me, like she was already mourning something we never even had. I hadn't seen her in days. The shop had reopened. People came and went. I'd stopped by twice under the excuse of checking if the shelves held. Both times she wasn't there. On the third try she was in the back office, sitting on a folding chair with an old shoebox on her lap. The door was half open. I knocked. Quiet. She looked up, startled, then softened. "Hey," she said. "Didn't mean to interrupt," I said. "You didn't." She closed the lid, like it mattered to keep the contents private, but she didn't hide the box. "Just cleaning up some ghosts." I leaned against the doorframe. "Bad kind or good kind?" She gave a small, humorless laugh. Depends who you ask. I didn't push, just waited. Finally, she opened the box again. Slow. Inside were photographs, some glossy, some faded, the corners bent. A man younger than her husband, smiling like he didn't know the picture would outlive him. She held one up. This was Mark, she said, her voice like it belonged to someone else. First person I ever thought I'd marry. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed still. He died in a car accident when I was 24, she continued. 3 months after this picture. I haven't looked at this box in, I don't even know. The air in the room shifted. Not because of me, not because of us, but because something underneath her finally cracked enough to let light through. I thought I'd built this life that made sense, she said. Married someone safe. Had a plan. Buried the ache. You know, like you're supposed to. She set the photo down, not gently, not carelessly. Just like it was heavy and her hands were tired. And then you show up, she said, eyes flicking to me, just for a second. Looking like someone I used to know. Acting like someone I almost loved. I swallowed hard. I didn't mean to. I know, she interrupted soft. That's the worst part. You didn't do anything. You're just here. And suddenly all the things I thought were dead aren't. Neither of us moved. The rain had stopped outside. The shop was too quiet for a place meant for people. She took a breath like she hadn't allowed herself to in years. And for the first time, she looked at me without fear. The day it all finally gave way, nothing dramatic happened. No yelling. No slammed doors. No kisses stolen in hallways or confessions whispered in the dark. Just a quiet afternoon. Sunlight pressing through the windows like it had nowhere else to go. I was fixing a loose bracket on one of the high shelves. She was sitting at the counter, chin in her hand, watching a couple browse. They left without buying anything. The bell above the door fell silent again. She didn't look up when she said, I told him we should take a break. My wrench slipped a little. You and my husband, she said. Like the words were a pebble she'd been rolling in her mouth all day, smooth now, harmless but heavy. He thinks I'm burned out. I let him think that. I climbed down the ladder. My heart wasn't racing. It was worse. Steady, low, like it already knew where this was going. You didn't have to tell me that, I said. I know, she said. But I didn't want you to think I was just disappearing. We stood in a stretch of silence that felt both merciful and cruel. I wanted to reach for her. I didn't. She stared at the floor like it might have the right words for us. I don't know what this is, she said quietly. And I don't want to hurt anyone. Not you. Not him. I nodded, throat tight. Me neither. She glanced up then, finally, and for a moment neither of us looked away. There was no hunger in it. No fantasy. Just recognition. Like two people finally seeing the same storm in each other's eyes. I moved first, not forward, just closer. Until we were standing side by side in the empty shop, barely a breath apart. Her fingers brushed against mine. Not by accident. Not an invitation. More like a surrender. A quiet acknowledgement that we were already past pretending this hadn't changed us. We stayed like that for a long time. No words. No plan. Just the sound of the world outside continuing, indifferent, while something inside both of us finally, silently, exhaled. She leaned her forehead gently against my shoulder, like a tired bird folding its wings. I closed my eyes. I didn't dare move. She didn't say she loved me, but she let her guard down. And that was louder than any I love you ever could be. It's been a year. The bookstore smells like it should. Paper and coffee and faint dust from corners that never quite get clean. I still work there, if you can call it that. We run it together now, though not the way people like to imagine when they hear a story like ours. She moved out. Not for me, that's the first thing she made clear, and the first thing I had to believe. She said she needed to live like she meant it again. Her husband didn't fight. Maybe he knew, even before we did, that something had already changed shape. We didn't fall into each other's arms after that quiet afternoon. We drifted, careful, slow, like testing ice, coffee after closing, long walks to the supply store we didn't need to make. Some days we hardly spoke at all. Some days I caught her watching me with a look I couldn't name and didn't dare ask about. What surprised me most wasn't the love, if that's even the right word. It was how much of it wasn't about us at all. It was about her remembering who she was before the years stacked on top of her like weight she never signed up for. It was about me learning that wanting someone doesn't mean owning them, or even staying with them. Sometimes it means standing beside them while they figure out who they are. We don't live together. We don't make promises. We don't need to. What we have now is quiet, warm, and honest. We built it like we built those shelves. Slow, deliberate, with a few screws bent along the way. I'm not sure where it goes from here. Maybe that's the point. I've stopped replaying the beginning, the first touch, the rain, the silence that used to swallow us whole. Now I replay little things. The way she teases customers who stack books sideways. The way she laughs when the register jams. The way she sometimes rests her hand on my back as she passes by. Not for anyone else to see, not even for me to read into. Just because it's there. Love isn't a story you finish. It's a room you keep walking into, over and over, even when it's messy, even when it's quiet. If you've watched this far, maybe you know what I mean. Maybe you've stood where I stood, between what you were taught to want and what you actually found. If you have, tell me, what did you choose?